Like, everyone's gonna die. I see that. I totally hear what you're saying. And that's a bummer. That's a bummer, man. Like, oof, that's rough. That's rough,
Yeah.
buddy.
Hi, I'm Kat,
And I'm Gabe, and
and
we're
we're
the
the
ghouls
ghouls
next
next door.
door, talking about
Talking
spooky
about
stuff.
spooky stuff.
Well, for people who are tuning in and listening, we are going to be covering the girl with all the gifts. I'd love to say the ghoul with all the gifts.
Yeah.
The girl with all the gifts from 2016, which is a coming of age story. It's also a zombie film, and it's really great. And we are continuing our monstrous femme series, and we're talking about something a little different. It's not generally a tale of coming of age,
Yeah.
or it's usually like consumerism or individuality or like
Yeah. This film is like unique too, because I feel like it's set, as you were saying, like it does something different for this specific subgenre of horror. Like it's doing something pretty unique and that subverts the usual like puberty makes monster times.
yeah, and it just happens to cover like that coming into your own thing that happens
Yeah.
with monstrous femmes, and then also like it's a zombie movie, which is really fun.
Yeah.
I totally slept on this film. Like, I did not like, people told me, they were like, "It's really great." I remember,
Yeah.
Len from, Micheaux Mission and the Black Tribbles, they covered it, on Micheaux Mission when it, like, came out, or, like, around
Okay.
that time, because 'cause they've been around forever, and, he was just like, "You're gonna really love it, like,
Yeah.
you're gonna really like it, it's gonna be awesome," and then, it was just always on my to-do list.
Yeah, I feel like I also missed the boat and that like I have heard of it and I feel like we've been finding trying to find a reason to get to it at some point. But we really never we don't watch movies for fun anymore, you know?
No. No. Yeah.
So it's like if there's not an episode, it's just like, all right, we'll get to it eventually. And that's kind of what happened with this one. So
Yeah. Usually it's like I really wanna cover something, so I'm like, "Well,
yeah.
how do we make it into a whole series? How do we keep talking about that this whole time?"
Yeah.
And it's worked out so far.
Yeah. And what I mean, what was great about this is that like I don't know, I feel like I would have loved it still as much as I did when if we watched it when it first came out, but, like, I
Mhm.
don't know, I also, like, really loved watching it now. Um, I just feel like I appreciated one that I waited, I guess. So
Mhm.
it's like, yeah, we missed it, but also it was like, I really appreciated it with this version of myself watching it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think being 5 years into the ghouls that we have different lens into which we're viewing content. So, I think we
Yeah.
appreciate it in a way we probably wouldn't have in 2016.
The honed media analysis classes. I mean, I think we still would have loved it. I think it's
Yes.
just like we see it more now than maybe we would have at, like, early Ghouls, yeah, because we were
Yes.
babies, we had baby media analysis classes, and now we're like
They were
we got
passive.
settings, we have
Yeah.
settings and buttons on here, so we're
Yeah.
like, "Doot, doot, doot."
Enhance.
Yeah,
Enhance. Yeah. Yeah. Should I just hop in? Should we just get into it?
sure, yeah, why not? Sure,
Cool.
yeah,
Let Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's do it. I'm in. Put me in, couch. Uh, excellent. So, like I said, we're talking about The Girl with All the Gifts from 2016, and it is about a scientist and a teacher living in a dystopian future embark on a journey of survival with a special young girl named Melanie, and is directed by Colm McCarthy and adapted from the book of the same name, written by Mike Carey. Um, so, like I said, it's based on the book, which is I'm going to talk about that at the end of this section, about like how different the interpretations can be because of certain decisions that were made regarding casting in
Yeah,
this film versus like how things were portrayed in the book, and the fact that like there's also this whole other level as, like, us as Americans viewing it, because it does take
Uh-huh.
place, in England, so there's, like, a whole different, like, tone and, theme that it's covering that, like, we're gonna put it on our own lens anyway. Um, but
Well,
yeah,
yeah, we
like I
can't
s
speak to stuff we don't know, you know?
yeah, exactly. But I'm gonna primarily talk about the film because I didn't actually read the book, though I do really want to now. Like, I'm interested
Mhm.
to see how it plays out. Um, it's definitely been on, like, the to be read on my Goodreads, and I probably know a few people who've read it, I just haven't. Again, we don't really do a lot of that for fun, although I am reading an eco horror book where there are special girls that are infected, which is pretty
Ooh.
called Wilder Girls, so maybe one day I'll do a review on that, but today, we're talking about Girl with All the Gifts. So, this film and the book as well follows a young girl named Melanie and her harrowing journey with her teacher, Miss Justino, and some others. And Melanie and the other children, like her, are something different. You
Uh-huh.
kind of get that just immediately, because we're introduced to them and they're strapped to wheelchairs and they're being verbally accosted by these military like guardians. But immediately you feel connected to and affectionate for Melanie. Like your heart goes out for her. Because when it's like, it's unsettling to see children treated in such a way. And they're
Yeah.
so like viscerally angry at them. Like the adults, quote unquote, like the people who are in charge, like, they
Yeah.
call them, like, abortions, they just call them all kinds of really triggering names, and it's super abusive and frightening, so you feel for these kids, you're like, "Why would they treat these kids like this?" Like,
Yeah.
kids are not deserving of this in any way, like, no matter what they had have done, like, there's nothing
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
warrant that, so
100%.
you're just like, "What?" But on top of that, just on top of, like, feeling defensive of these children and, like, you wanna protect them, there's this other level, and that's just on Melanie herself because she's really smart, and she's incredibly charming and perplexing. Like, you just really wanna know what her whole deal is, and how, like, she could be like this.
Yeah.
She's just immediately likable, I think. And so you want to know like why one these adults are being so mean to these children, but also why they're afraid of them because it definitely feels less like they're being very mean and kind of throwing around their power, but they're also pretty terrified. Like they do act very cautionary, and a lot of that aggression comes from a point of fear and
Yeah.
of not understanding and not knowing what they are. So you're like, what is going on? What is this? And I don't ever remember anyone telling me this is a zombie film. Um,
Yeah.
I was, I believe, told it was like I knew she was a special girl and it was kind of post-apocalyptic, but I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
But I do like that even unintentionally, it becomes a bit of an Afrofuturism kind of tale, which is really fun because of Melanie. But you learn that she is incredibly intelligent, and you figure this out by her rapid fire recitation of the periodic table of elements just from her brain, and her answers to these like really weird brain twisters that this like
Uh-huh.
doctor gives her. She even asks her about Schrodinger's cat and things
Yeah.
like that. Like ask her to really think through these thought experiments, and you're like, why? But the kid's like, yeah, I'll do it. But the thing like about Melanie is that she's also aware that something is wrong. Like
Uh-huh.
you you get the impression that she's only ever been treated this way, like there's never been another way. Like she didn't have a stable life and now she has this. Like this just seems like a norm, but still doesn't seem right.
Yeah.
And she throughout the whole film works to emotionally disarm any character that interacts with her. And whether this is to convince them that she's harmless or to manipulate them into a false sense of security so she can attack them later is the question, because Melanie and the other children aren't human. Not entirely, anyway. They're half human, half hungries. And hungries is this film's fun word for zombies. Not walkers, not whatever else people call them. What are clickers? You know,
Yeah.
um, they're hungries. And so in this world, a cordyceps fungus, like the one that infected folks in The Last of Us, has taken hold of most of society, and we get a glimpse into what's left of the zombie society that they're living in.
Yeah.
So we get to see this military base in England where they have essentially farmed and study these children with the hopes of finding a cure.
Yeah.
Um, However, something terrible and predictable happens in the zombie film as the Hungries get in and wreak havoc, forcing Miss Justineau, Melanie, the doctor that was going to kill her for the cure, and others to flee their makeshift home. Um, and during this journey on the outside, the human characters are now forced to reconcile Melanie with being a child. Like it was so easy to just lock a door and monsterize her from the other
Yeah.
side of it, but when you're like forced to see her every day and see how charming and beautiful she is, you're like, how can I do this? And every single one of
Yeah.
those humans is like, whoa, maybe we were wrong.
Yeah, maybe these are all just
They're
children,
just
and we have just
children.
been horrible to
We're
them.
just the worst humans, and we are not making a good case for ourselves, which is the
Yep.
whole thing for this. So through her charm and innocence, they learn to trust and care for her, and they start to see her as more human than hungry. But she is no less hungry than before. Because she is half hungry, Melanie has some sort of superpower because of this. Like she can move among the hungries without being harmed. Hungries don't eat their own kind, one soldier had explained. So she becomes this troop's like one tool for survival, finding them safe routes along the way to help in providing insight into the nature of the Hungries as well, to help them feel safe and kind of harbor them to like shuttle them to a safer area, supposedly. Um, but there's like this allowance to be true to herself that ignites a flame in Melanie. Because, like I said, she's half human, so she's proving the humanity side to them, but she's also discovering the bigger part of her that isn't human when she's
Yeah.
alone with herself. So, in these moments where she's alone and she's going out to like find these safe routes or figure things out, she's like searching for food or whatever. She has the opportunity to take in the world around her and understand her place in it. So, she sees the fear the Hungries invoke in the humans and realize that it's similar to the fears that they have about her. But she doesn't understand that fear because she thinks I'm totally normal. There's nothing wrong with me. And there's continually like this question of like her humanity and if she is alive, like in the traditional sense of like what we view humans as being alive. Like she definitely is alive, but there's just this whole question of like, are you real, or are you just like an intelligent zombie, right? Like, are you still
Yeah.
performing the tasks of this parasite that's linked to you, or are you an individual? Which is
Yeah.
like, honest, I mean, are we all? We're all just operating as zombies who just parrot all the tasks and things that we need to do. Spoiler alert. But it's just a
Capitalism.
little more obvious when she's a zombie. But the whole time they're trying to like prove that she is more than that, and she's like, no, I am hungry still, and that thankfully I am because y'all would be dead.
Yeah,
Um,
right?
so you're welcome. But on the surface, this is a story about a girl coming of age and finding her power. It's also about the next generation of life persevering, evolving, and prospering in the world despite the condition they've inherited it in. It's
Yeah.
about the earth leaving us behind, and it's about Black liberation. So it's gonna get crazy on the goals. Here we go. I'm about to get into spoiler central, and I'll give a big spoiler alert. So definitely check out this film if you haven't. It's such a good film. Like it's totally worth your time. Pause here, go watch it, come back later. I want like you need this ending to hit you the way that it does when you don't know it's coming. Because you're gonna
Yeah.
get led down a very specific path, and then you're gonna be like, "What?" Um, so highly recommend, please do. But there when I have to get into spoiler central because there are some really important themes in this film that really revolve around the ending and some of the things that occur that are kind of like reveals. For one, the in the book, Melanie is a white girl. And in fact, she is a quintessential white girl with skin as white as snow, blue eyes, and blonde hair, while Miss Justineau, however, is a black woman with skin so dark she was like her own shadow, is what the book says. And one day I will probably do a whole review on how people of color and black people are described in books one day.
Yeah.
So we're just gonna I won't go into that right now, but I'm gonna put
Just
a
put it out
pin
there.
in
It's
it.
gonna happen.
Put a pin in that. Cause what? Um what edit? It's fine. Okay. Um I just like read something. It was like one of Stephen King's more recent books, and it still was a problem. And I was like, how is this happening? Anyway, in this film, they decided to cast the phenomenal young actress Senia Nanua, and she is a black girl. And so, like Night of the Living Dead and She Never Died, which we've covered, by casting a black person lead in their film, the directors and creators have greatly changed the narrative. They completely changed it, whether that's intentional or not. Like Romero didn't know, like, it didn't intend to have his film be as racially impactful. Um, as it was, and it perhaps it wouldn't have even been as impactful if it had not been released at the same time that Dr. King was assassinated. So, like, you don't always know that when you're going in, but it is important to discuss. Like, when you put a black person in a film, it does change the narrative. It changed the impact of things. It's like uh, Sade Sellers,
Uh-huh.
when we had her on our show, and she talked about how I Know What You Did Last Summer, like the first
Mhm.
one, if it were black kids who were having to deal with that, it would go a very different way. Like
Yeah.
their motivations for wanting to cover up that hit and run would be a lot different than what these white kids are going into. So it just comes with like the territory of putting black people into it. But it's also like, again, we're coming into this with like our American lens. So
Uh-huh.
our black culture is a little different. But that doesn't mean you can't like take and be affected by a film with a message like this,
Yeah.
and kind of put that over things that are happening in your own world. So I think that this film has really evolved into some interesting discussions. So, spoiler alert. It's
It's
happening. It's
happening.
happening. So get out if you're not ready for it. And then welcome back. Melanie, on her journey with the humans, encounters a tower of spores. These spores could end the world, she is told, because they house the parasite that has changed humanity into to the hungries. And the amount of them and the way that they would spread through the air means that everyone would be infected. And for humans, that equals the end of everything.
Yeah.
Like, then we'd all be the parasites. That's a bad thing.
Yeah.
And the same parasite lives within Melanie and the other children that were born from infected mothers. Um, and the in the children in this like new generation, the parasite has learned to live with the host, like along with the host, and evolved to this like happy medium where the host isn't a mindless drone that's just like eating. But
Yeah.
also has like instead has control of its body and mind unless it's introduced to human flesh and then nature kicks in. But
Yeah.
we
Or
all
just
been
flesh in general, actually, because they have cats that
oh yeah, yeah.
are
Which is like a good
consumed.
point because they don't get changed. Animals don't change because that's what they're gonna end up having to eat anyway. Uh,
Yeah.
spoilers. Melanie finds a new group of children who intend to eat her human captors, I mean friends, and she immediately tries to help, proving her humanity and compassion. But she also discovers a power in this moment. She interacts with the kids, and because she is this hybrid who is both monster and intelligent human, she can lead them. She shows them through force and wit that she is the alpha. Like, and I use that term loosely because that's not real. Alphas
Yeah.
aren't real, but she's the leader.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to convey. And after this encounter, Melanie and her friends are attacked by the doctor. The doctor, who none of us ever trusted, it was messing things up this whole time, uh, is dying from
Yeah.
an infection and wants to complete their life's work, which is to find a cure to save humanity. They want to, go down in history as a person that saved everyone. And maybe that's not even the motivation. It's like so many people you know and love have died or been changed. And that is really devastating. And wanting a cure is totally reasonable. As we discussed in the Last of Us episode, like when you're presented with one life for all of humanity to be alive, it's a really
Yeah.
tough decision for a lot of
Yeah.
people to make. Like if you're really put into that situation, what would you do? And in this, that's exactly what it's like. So the doctor wants to find a cure, and the way to do that is to actually kill Melanie. Um, and it's like, what is one kid for everyone? Um, and while this like whole interaction is happening, where the doctor is pleading with her, trying to reason with Melanie, like, you care for them now. Like, you care for all the people, like, we care for you. And so don't
In
you care
quotes.
so yeah, we care for you. We've performed care for you. And don't you care for them so much that you want to save them? And Melanie asked right out, she just said, "Are we alive? Are me and those other kids alive?" Like, this whole question that you've had this whole time of that, like, are we valid humans essentially? Like, do we
Yeah.
matter? Um, and the doctor says, "Yeah." And Melanie then gives one of the most amazing responses in horror and any other media I've seen by saying, "Then why should it be us who die for you?" Which like, that line, we were, like, floored. Like, we were watching it,
Yeah.
I was like, "Did you just hear?" I was like, "What?"
Yeah,
Because
that never
it's
happened.
not what you're expecting. Because like, that whole
Yeah.
time you are like, she does really care for Miss Justineau, and she is so sweet, and there is a little parts of her that are but, like, you feel like, "Oh, she's so smart, she would understand, she's saving the whole world." When you saw the tower, you thought, "Oh, no, don't let anything bad happen with that." Like, your instinct is to be like, "People be saved." We have to save people, always, like, we're people, we want the people saved. So for when she says that, you're like, you're right. Why?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of layers to that. So I'll try to be as concise as possible because I feel like there's like two really big messages, and then within one of them, there's like other
Yeah.
interpretations. So one of these is that there's an eco horror element to the story that plays well into the monstrous femme coming of age tale that Melanie is going through. Because she is the next evolutionary step of humanity, not the undoing of it completely. The world has
Yeah.
changed enough that humans cannot stay as they are and live. Later, after setting the spores on fire and in doing so dooming the world to be hungries, Melanie interacts with a soldier who, over this like whole interaction, slowly starts to care for her. But he was a total douche the
It's
whole time
so
until
rude,
that. Like,
yeah.
how dare you even try to make it like we should care about you? Anyway, he cries out and he says, "It's all over now." To which Melanie says the second best thing in horror and other films. She says, "I'm sorry, Sergeant. I'm so sorry. It's going to be all right. It's not over. It's just not yours anymore." And I was like, okay, this film is about this film is eco horror. It is about the world leaving us behind.
Yeah.
Because at this point, like, she really is genuinely sorry. Like, there is it's not, I wouldn't say remorse, like she's not regretting. She's just
Yeah.
sorry that that's what it has to be. Like,
Yeah,
she's
like,
sorry
she
that he
understands the implication of what
yeah.
it is.
Like, everyone's gonna die. I see that. I totally hear what you're saying. And that's a bummer. That's a bummer, man. Like, oof, that's rough. That's rough,
Yeah.
buddy. But but also but also, why should we die for you? Who are you?
Sweetie, why should we die for
First of
you?
all, you're old. Okay. Okay, you're old. Second of all, you did this. You and all the people like you did
Yeah,
this.
you made
This
the
is
planet
your
mad, so the
fault.
spores happened.
This is your fault. So I'm sorry, not sorry. So she's like, she is sorry that this is happening to them, just not so sorry that she would sacrifice herself and her people for a race of people that would never show her the same mercy. They would never do that.
Yeah,
And
they did
so
nothing but horrible to her the entire time.
the entire time they've like villainized her and the people around her, and just they only hurt her. They've only hurt her by casting her as this other. And she is just like a young, like, if you just think about it, like, think about like young people who are really sad about the the condition of the world. You think that young people, if they were given the option to be like, okay, all the old people, like even me included, like,
You go to
we're
space,
getting up
don't
there.
come
They
back.
have to go to, yeah, go to space. Something happens to them. All old people are gone now, and we get to fix things. Like, you don't think they'd be like, yeah.
Yeah,
Say
100%.
less.
Because
So
otherwise I'm just gonna do drugs, so
yeah, like, I'm just gonna be sad because you've ruined the world enough that I can't live
yeah.
here anymore, so whatever. So there's this whole level of it being eco horror, this whole level of her being this monster that is now this evolutionary step forward, for humanity, alright? Again, she's not erasing humanity, she's making it better. She is of the better who can adapt to this now new society. And because all the spores turn humans into hungries anyway, it's not like they're ever gonna eat humans again. The humans are gone, so they're only eating animals. So you're just people more. You're still people
Yeah, you're
again. Like
just still
you
doing the
took
same
out the
thing.
one thing that they were mad about, which is that you eat people, and now that's gone. It's not okay. Anyway, there's a whole other level to this. So let me get into that before before this whole episode just me like ah! So however, by casting this young black woman, the narrative has become deeper than just that of the evolutionary next step generation leaving us behind. It becomes a conversation about black liberation. And in a phenomenal article that Kat found on Afropunk titled The Girl with All the Gifts and Black Girls Destroying the World to Save Themselves by Hari Ziad, they explain this impactful shift of narrative and the impact it has on the ultimate goal of the story. Considering how often us schools are disappointed by films that pull their punches and don't commit to revolution, it is safe to say the ghouls really love this film. So Zaid says, I'm not sure the filmmakers made this switch to purposely reinforce ideas of Black revolution. Indeed, the close up of Miss Justineau crying as she's trapped in a tiny room as the last human being Melanie keeps alive at the end for the purpose of continuing to teach the other zombie children seems to be included to invoke a feeling of sympathy. White women are always the most ideal victims. If one sympathizes with Justineau, as a white audience might, and as I believed was intended, the film becomes less a triumph and more a tragedy. This is the tragedy we are told would happen if Black folks really were to destroy the world and humanity for our own sakes. We don't have the tools to police ourselves, or we are too good to be so heartless, or we don't need saving in the first place because eventually things will naturally work out if only we were a bit more patient or respectful, or respectable. Interpreting this as a tragedy tells us that Melanie should have waited for a way to save herself and the other humans, even if there was no promise of that way ever existing. Even if waiting meant passing up just saving herself, even if the humans had no interest in compromising in return. F that. We are not white audiences. It is time we stop pretending as if we need them. It is a time a black girl destroyed the world, destroyed humanity, destroyed society to save herself. And it is time we cheered them on when they tried and succeed. And that's exactly what I felt like when
Yeah.
I was like, and again, because part of it is like, okay, this young girl is leaving the old ways behind, and again, evolving past. But honestly, the fact that it was, you know, to have like her say, then why should it be us who die for you? It just hits differently when it's uttered by a young black girl to an older white woman. Period. It just
Yeah.
it's like I don't care where you are in the world. Like you're gonna see that and be like, wait a second. Um, and it's really just that, right? It's just like that is representative of all the times when people have been told to behave or like don't match the energy, right? Like you have to rise above, you gotta be better than that, you gotta be quiet. Um,
Yeah.
saying that violence isn't the answer for a lot of things, whereas like, okay, 400 plus years of violence on them, why not? Why not?
Yeah.
Like, who are you to say now that it's violence isn't the answer now that it's our answer, but it was the answer for everybody else, and
Yeah, like,
so
why do I have to be the better person in this
yeah,
scenario?
exactly, and that's 100% what that very weighted sentence means when it is this young black girl saying it instead of just like who Melanie was written to be, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, the result isn't all positive though, because some people have mixed feelings about the switch and like that interpretation, kind of similar to what Ziad was saying. So the fact that like this race swapping of the primary characters of Melanie and Justineau could have a different interpretation that's also harmful. Because if you do interpret Melanie as not the hero, but instead the villain, as Ziad explains, they felt like that was the intent because like she's pretty much like villainized. And if you do see Miss Justineau as the victim,
Yeah.
at the end, then it wouldn't have the same empowering impact, right? It's gonna hit a different
Yeah.
audience in a different way. Um, but, yeah, it with this, instead of a young black girl taking the power back from the oppressors, it becomes she's a monster. And in
Yeah.
the book, having Miss Justineau be not only the most caring, compassionate, and human in the story, but also having her be a dark-skinned black woman is also powerful. Having Melanie be this idyllic little white girl who ultimately brings down all of humanity can be interpreted as like European colonialism,
Yeah.
especially like it's in England. Let me tell you, they've been doing that. And instead of fighting against oppression, it becomes a desire to recreate the world in her image, a very Aryan image, mind you. Um, she is described in that book. So it could really twist like how you're looking at it. Like you can see is like trying to make Miss Justineau the white victim is gives you a different point of view than the strength that Miss Justineau has in the book. Although, if it does end in the same way, then I can't say that I enjoy the idea of a black woman being caged to continue
Yeah.
to cater to young white people. Does not sound good.
Yeah.
But if Melanie is the villain, then that just confirms the villainy of it, but still not a great image. Not a great image. So I'm gonna stick with Miss Justineau from the film being in there. And so I wonder how you interpret it, Ghoul Scouts, and I wonder how it affects you. Like, do you see Melanie as a monstrous femme? Perhaps you see her as a representation of white fear of black people finally fighting back against oppression in a way of equal violent force, of which they've been oppressed under. If we choose to see Villainy. Like giving her own nickname. If we choose to see Melanie as a hero, an evolutionary next step, even simply a child inheriting the earth, can we then root for her in the end? And can we celebrate with her as she teaches and molds the next generation into superhumans?
Yeah. Superhuman time. It is your time now. Yeah, no, that's super real. And I want to read the book, honestly. Like I want to read it because I feel like there's so much. I don't know if it'll hit like different because I get like what the author was maybe trying to say.
Hmm.
I also like just don't know enough about the author too to like know if like should they be saying it.
Not, yeah, not, but also it's like, again, it's England. There's like different, I'm sure there's different connotations and different feelings behind it.
Yeah.
That the, like, writer's original intent was, and I didn't even bother looking into it. I was like, my part is already long enough. I can't also be like,
Yeah.
"Here's what the book's about," and then it'd just
Yeah,
be here
maybe
for
one day we'll cover the book. We'll figure it out. We'll
yeah.
see. I mean, honestly, we write our own stories, so let's go.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
do it. We make the decisions here. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's like we're in charge of ourselves. It's wild. Uh,
Yeah.
one thing that's fun about my section is that it's not. Usually, it's like let's talk about facts. That
Yeah.
is not facts today. It's just I had a lot more opinions about this than I thought I did, and also, just in general, I feel like sometimes I get like too much into like I must have sources for everything, and then like you lose like your own thoughts in
Voice,
there.
yeah.
Yeah, so I was like, today instead, it's gonna be Cat's opinions instead
I
of
love
Cat's
it. I'm
facts.
here for it.
So everyone, you're welcome. I don't know if you'll actually feel that way at the end, but I think you will. To be transparent, I've never read this book for this film. I don't read a lot unless it's like an article online, but it's okay. And my interpretation is entirely based on the film and not the book. Also, I was raised American, as Gabe was saying at the beginning, like our interpretation of this British story is from like our personal perspective. And it's very possible other people had an entirely different experience with this
Yeah.
film as well as the book. Um, and I love the film. Like honestly, like, it's maybe one of my top horror films now. And it did make me want to read the book because I'm just like curious. I want to know. I want to have all the information in terms of like what the different impacts are and messages from each version of the story. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to give some context as to why it impacted me how it did. So I absolutely loved this film. I think it did a fantastic job using the zombie apocalypse as like a staging ground for complex storytelling. There's so much that was done with this film that could have easily followed, and I think maybe we expected it to these more tired plot lines, and instead
Mhm.
did like such unique things that we hoped for. But honestly, like the amount of times we're
We're jaded.
disappointed with the film, like, we don't expect it anymore. We're like, "I mean, maybe it'll do it. Is it gonna do it? We don't know." And this film did it, like, it
I've been hurt before.
yeah, so it's literally like as a way to make sure we just don't hate everything all the time. I think we like guard ourselves going into things. So like I did not expect the ending of this film. I was like, they're not gonna. Like we want them to, but are they? So honestly, like there was also so much character development that was delivered through just such simple scripted lines instead of like drawn out action sequences. That part at the end with the soldier and him mentioning like, it was literally a sentence, and he was like, "My wife was pregnant when the zombies time started." And I was like, "And I hope that if my baby is out there, you find them or something." Like, that was, like, so
Yeah. Or,
powerful.
like, feel
I was
about him.
yeah, I was like, "Oh my god, I hated him, like, this entire time, and now I just, like, kinda get it."
Yeah, but it's like any of those kids could have been yours then,
Yeah, like,
and
you've been,
you
like,
just
murdering and
ruined this
tying to
out.
chairs and stuff, but,
Mhm.
like yes. So, it's also like, dude, weird hill to die on. Why was this what you chose to do with
Oh,
your
okay, dude.
time?
Okay,
That
Gramps.
could have been your kid. You just said that. So like why are you like, let's be
This is
really
awkward.
horrible to all these kids?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know. But it just like added so much character development in like a really subtle and thoughtful way that
Yeah.
like wasn't like we need a 4-hour movie to tell this story. It was like, hey, here's a sentence that's gonna provide like extreme amounts of character development very quickly. So the film somehow managed to be, like, subtle and direct at the same time all the way through, and I just really appreciated it. So, the ending was my favorite part because, honestly, like, for the ghouls, I feel like this is something we say a lot. It's, the message of it really resonated with me in that humanity has been here, destroying each other and the planet for centuries, waiting like waiting and expecting chance after chance to keep going, to keep trying.
Mhm.
Maybe our chances are exhausted. Like that's what the film basically said. Like we have been squandering the gifts. The girl with all the she has all the gifts. We have been
We need to get
taking the
her
gifts,
out of them.
taking and taking and taking. And maybe the planet is done dealing with our crap, essentially. Maybe we squandered the gifts and we should stop expecting more. Um, and I mean, is what it is. But
Yeah.
so, like, yeah, essentially, like, when the end of this movie came, I was thrilled by, like, so many pieces of it, but specifically that they didn't make Melanie their sacrifice and instead,
Mhm.
like, gave her autonomy, which is something, like, ironically, you don't always see in zombie films, and especially with, like, monstrous femme stories, like, it's usually them navigating these spaces and being like, "Dang, it would be really cool if, like, I had any power."
Yeah.
And I feel like in these like when you think that a character should be sacrificing something, you usually take their autonomy. Like that's something that we saw in The Last of Us, but I'll get into that like as we go. But essentially, I love that they like allowed Melanie to have their autonomy in this very specific situation. And honestly, she owed them nothing. Like, and it
Yeah.
was just so refreshing that when Melanie delivered the line, like, why should we have to die for you to live? To which I say, heck yes. The humans, like the entire film did nothing but showcase how awful they were, like their cruelty, their hatred, their capacity for viewing others as less.
Yeah.
Like literally nothing to inspire any sense of compassion or admiration. It wasn't like, hey, like we're good. You should want to sacrifice
We're
yourself for us. There's
worthy.
literally one human that kind of did that.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, like outside of occasionally treating Melanie with like diet kindness, which is like the bare
Yeah.
minimum of human experience.
That's
Like
so
that's like the
real.
that's the bare minimum expectation is to just treat someone like they're also a person. Um, there was no reason, in my opinion, for Melanie to even hesitate in making her choice. And I appreciated the fact she didn't.
Yeah.
Um, like just because her teacher was the one human who had the capacity to see her as a living thing, like as a
Yeah.
living being, that didn't erase all the other humans being the literal worst the entire film.
Yeah, she had to work so hard just to get them to treat her like a human.
Yeah, and it's like also it kind of ties back into like that other thing, like where it's like our judgment of humanity is purely based on the like what humanity like the fact that you have to be human to matter. Like that's
Mhm.
also like a whole problem. So
Yeah.
it's a
You have to
whole
perform
thing.
this specific version of human.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, people are allowed to be mad when you treat them like crap their entire lives. Like, who are you to say that they can't be mad? So yeah, at the end of the day, um, the uninfected humans place their value higher than Melanie and all the other Hungries. So they're asking something of her that's honestly absurd. Like there are instances where the humans even kind of mention this, where they're like, who we were before making it to that base. We did horrible things.
Yeah.
We were the monsters. Like they say something along those lines. And it's like,
And you
yeah,
feel real bad about it now.
yeah. And it's like clearly you recognize the wrongs you've done, but you're running from your accountability just as much as you're running from the Hungries. Like,
Mm. Snaps.
so their like occasional kindness to Melanie is honestly at like after that just manipulative. Just
Mm.
like all of their other interactions with her. They treat her like a monster the entire film with the goal of making Melanie view herself that way. They treat her as less the entire film with the goal of Melanie viewing herself that way so that she'll do what they want. So she will sacrifice herself because she'll think they've literally never been kind to her. So their goal is for her to view herself as less and therefore worthy of sacrificing herself for them.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like it's all very manipulative and like she should not. She is not what they think of her and does not owe them any kindness, honestly. Uh, so like as you were saying, it's like that's the same. No mercy would have been given by them.
Mhm.
So like, why is it expected of her to give that mercy back? So ultimately, Melanie owed them nothing. So I thought it was really great that the film didn't make her a sacrifice because if they did, honestly, it might have changed my entire perspective on the film. I don't know because I know the book does a whole different time, and it could be that like because of like how I was cast, like I just felt more for the character because of that. I don't know,
Yeah.
but what I have heard about the book is that it is really interesting, and honestly, has very vastly different impact. So I'm curious, and hopefully one day I'll read the book.
Yeah. I will
Um,
also say I think, like, I still would have felt pretty strongly,
yeah,
about Melanie, even if she was the white girl.
yeah, I
Like,
think
at
so
the end,
too.
like, I think I still would have liked like, I still would have been like, "Yeah, she wins." Like, so it's not as impactful, but I still would have wanted her to win.
Yeah, because it's like the whole idea is that they've been like tortured and treated like monsters their entire life. And there's just something like by these people, like, and there's just something that doesn't sit right with me about that.
Yeah.
Like maybe we don't do that, guys. So one thing that was interesting about this film is that it had some similarities to the Last of Us games, in more than one way. In that, like, they used the cordyceps fungus, as well as like kind of like the theme that's explored. But I appreciated what this film did with the storyline. So similar to the Last of Us games, Ellie, like Melanie, is expected to sacrifice herself for a vaccine. One big difference is that Ellie like wants to,
Mm,
and there's also this like story of having their autonomy stripped
mhm,
from them that I didn't appreciate about Ellie's story. Like I feel like it would have been fine if Ellie was like, "Hey, I don't want to be a vaccine person,"
mhm.
but like Joel does that for her, and that's messed up. But I appreciated that this film didn't do that to Melanie. Like it was Melanie's choice, and when she said no, like that's just what it had to be,
Yep.
essentially. Um, and something else that I appreciate about the film is that like it made Melanie very zombie forward. Like instead of harping on her
Her
humanity and
zombie.
like trying to make the viewer wrap their head around why Melanie deserved to live by like removing her zombie traits, Melanie like leaned into the power that came with her abilities. And I thought that was like really powerful as a statement too. Like
Mhm.
she didn't have to change herself or sacrifice her identity to like make the uninfected humans feel better. Like sure she did like try to like make them feel more comfortable, but at the end of the day she made her choice and they're just going to have to live with that.
Mhm.
She remained Melanie and a Hungry simultaneously without compromising or giving into like the expectation that she should sacrifice herself. And the sacrifice is like the idea that someone should sacrifice themselves is something that is explored a lot in zombie scenarios, especially with like this idea that like there could be a cure. But it's
Mhm.
also something that like humanity as a whole has reckoned with for a long time, especially like Eurocentric audiences. So this idea of the necessity of the sacrifice and forgiveness for like the atrocities that have been pushed as a narrative throughout history as well as like a lot to unpack. There's this idea that the sacrifice of one should be made for the whole, that the
Mhm.
greater good, uh, there's like a long history of attempting to validate atrocities with this view of like necessary evil, when ultimately that is just an attempt to excuse oneself from accountability by claiming it was necessary.
Chidi is
So
having a panic attack.
yeah.
Chidi is losing it.
Yeah, he's like, "What do we do? Is it the
The
train?"
train.
Yeah, so it's just like the like it's a very Eurocentric idea, I think, like this theme of like the necessary sacrifice. And it's seen a lot in the story of like Jesus Christ,
Mm,
that he
yeah.
sacrificed himself for humanity to be get forgiven, that he loved people despite their sins, flaws, and otherwise, like forgave them. And that like he loved and forgave them despite the fact that people literally murdered him in cold blood in
Yep.
an extremely brutal fashion.
On
Um,
display
yeah, and I
and
think there's a
cheered.
lot to unpack there as well. But I think ultimately, like Eurocentric audiences tend to expect forgiveness and sacrifice when approaching topics like this, and are often spoon-fed that narrative. So they expect Melody to sacrifice herself for Miss Just to Know and humanity as a whole. And when that doesn't happen, it's surprising. So, like, all that is to say is I appreciated the change of pace, and I think it like really added to the story. I was like, yes.
100%.
Um, but it's also interesting when applying this to, like the monsters femme, and I think it takes on like a different meaning, like the use of zombies, and how like the zombie monsters femme is kind of different, especially in the way the story took it. So what we see in a lot of monsters femme narratives and in creative and historical storytelling is the idea that the monster doesn't always win. The monster either lives below the surface, outside humanity, or like loses entirely. That like good prevails against the monster, or that the monster like learns to live either with humanity and that humanity as a whole comes out the other side mostly unchanged, or they like just go away. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
they
They're
only exist
ostracized.
at night, or if they're the mermaid, they go out into the ocean and just don't
They
bother
become
people
sea
no
foam.
more. Uh, so like essentially like the monster changes that like loses their autonomy and power by like going off into the sidelines and like kind of just letting humanity do what it's going to do. And while these narratives can garner like sympathy for the monster, there's also this theme that the human matters more, I think, because they
Mhm.
still get the limelight, you know, and that the monster must like adjust to this human centered planet. I appreciated this film didn't do that. And instead, humanity had its turn. And now it's
Mhm.
zombie human hybrid time, to be authentically themselves out in the light, and all the humans go away. And I think something that's interesting that we see with witches, succubi, cameos, werewolves, and humans, um, is that the humans usually have the numbers in these narratives, that there are fewer monsters than humans, so that the
Mhm.
advantage is in the humans' court, essentially. But zombies kind of present the opposite, where they're often end up outnumbering the human. So where one is to exist in the peripheral, the zombie demands the limelight. I thought that was like a really interesting difference in like the monstrous storyline.
Mhm.
And the positioning of zombies as mindless is also very different from the narrative of this story. There being a transitional group of zombies that are kind of mindless that set the stage for this emerging generation of intelligent, symbiotic zombie human hybrids. As we talked about in many previous schools episodes, there's so much that zombies can represent when taking an analytical look at society, be it consumerism, cannibalism, loss of autonomy, among other things. And as we learned in the Last of Us episode, something that's really interesting is that the fungus for the cordyceps fungus that we see in this film is actually a real fungal infection that impacts ants and spiders. So if you're curious about that and the scientific accuracy of the fungal zombie experience, definitely check that episode out. There's a
Yeah.
lot to unpack there. And I thought like the use of the virus in this way, it was similar to Last of Us in that like you would probably need gas masks to survive because you can't just breathe the air,
Mhm.
and that it is airborne. But like it mimics very much like the actual cordyceps fungus and how it would interact with the brain, and also like symbiosis, I think is what it's called. And they mention it in the film actually, like when the doctor and Melanie are talking, basically about like a fungus interacting with a host in like a symbiotic relationship. Like they are working together, they aren't overtly hurting each other. So that's like a real thing too. Like there are animal species that do that. There's funguses that do that, that kind of like act in tandem and like in this kind of like partnership. So there are elements to this film, as terrifying as that is, that like could maybe happen. I don't know if we're at a fungal infection spread that like we have these pods and we need to be scared because the zombies are coming.
Mhm.
But there are fungi that outside of the cordyceps fungus that like do act as a mind control type thing. And I put some sources for that in my script notes, but I did not get to read all of them. But there are real funguses that like do zombify different animals.
Mhm.
And that's something that could happen in the world. Will it impact humans? Who knows? I don't think we have that information yet.
Yeah, we don't know. Who knows? Who knows? Zombies might be inevitable. Um,
Yeah.
but yes, I agree
We've
with all the
written
things
enough
that you
about
said.
it, you know? We've written enough about it that, like,
Yeah.
let them come.
Yeah. We all feel like we would know what to do, and then I feel like we wouldn't because it would be like a
Yeah.
very different kind, and we'd be like, "That none of Romero did not prepare me for this. It has nothing to do with the head. Like maybe it's controlling some other nervous system part or something." Um,
Yeah,
who
there's a lot
knows?
of things that could happen, and I think, like, the brain control element, like, zombies can a lot of the times represent this, like, fear of loss of autonomy, and I think that wasn't in like, you have that whole generation that was, so that was interesting piece
But
of this
even
film.
still, like there was little aspects where they were holding on to things, like they were
Yeah,
performing, like the one who like was pushing the stroller. And the
yeah,
doctor was like, "I've never seen a zombie or hungry with maternal instincts before." And so, like, after a while being there, like parts of you kind of come back, and that's been explored in zombie films too, where they are performing like actions, like they end up at the mall because they're
yeah.
performing
They're like, "I
consumerism.
used to go
Yeah,
to
like
spend
go to
money."
work or whatever, like your brain's just like, do the actions, which I think is interesting. I did wanna, highlight one other book though that, is really I mean, has similar themes, especially when we
Uh-huh.
have this black girl as a protagonist, and that is the book series Lilith's Brood by Octavia Butler, who's an
Ooh,
amazing, like, Afro sci-fi creator, sci-fi writer, like, honestly, one
yeah,
of the most amazing, impactful ones. And Lilith's Brood, uh, like Dawn, kind of has like a similar theme. That's the first one, where it is like this woman who wakes up and like humans are pretty much gone, and she's tasked
yeah.
with like bringing about the next generation that will be hybrids, or ideally would be hybrids between this like alien race and her. So
Okay.
definitely check it out. I'm like it's on my list. Like I love Octavia Butler, and I've been meaning to read more. And so I'm like that's gonna be the next trilogy I fight through. So especially because sci-fi is like something we're really into right now. So might be interesting. So definitely
Yeah.
check that out. So that's Lilith's Brood series, the trilogy. I think it's
We're
a
giving you a lot
trilogy.
of books to
Girl with
get
All the
through.
Gifts,
Yeah.
and then Wilder Girls. I actually can't remember the name of the author, Rory Power. It's
Yeah.
pretty sweet. It's like short. Working through it, and, and again, it's about girls who get powers. Well, not powers. They're different. They're affected by nature, Zika horror, and something happens, and now they're all a little weird. They're all doing stuff, but it's not like X-Men or something. It's actually like
Yeah.
really scary and sad, and also super queer. So, highly recommend just for that because you get that whole extra element of it being a really cool thing the ghouls would love.
Yeah.
Talk about representation. So, uh, yeah, I think that was a phenomenal film on so many levels. There's nothing
Yeah.
about it that I was disappointed in or like upset about. Like I said, like if anything, it just confirmed feelings that I was going to have at the end. Like I never felt like that didn't need to be there, and that's
Yeah,
so
no, that's
nice.
true.
It's so nice to have a film that you're like 10 out of 10. It's good, like coming from like Jacob's Wife, where we were like, this is like in the top 5 worst horror films I've seen that, like, angered us, to
Yeah.
having, like, now we have one of our top 5 favorites in this
Yeah, it was
series.
refreshing, honestly. And I mean, like, I feel like there's even more we could say about it in terms of like even just like unpacking the scene like at the beginning sequence
Mhm.
and like connecting that back to like how many times in history have people collectively dehumanized a group
Yeah.
for the benefit of whatever they decided was more important.
Yeah. And also, like, the education of children, like, specifically
Yeah.
with, like,
Not treating them like they're people either.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, there's so much to be said. And it's so refreshing. Very unique. Like, it's just not something I ever thought it would be. And I'm so happy that we are covering it on this series. And we're almost done with this series. We have 2 more episodes after this. One is like a surprise that we didn't know we were gonna do, but I'm very excited to do
One is
it.
like, can we do it?
And, like,
Yes,
of
we make
course,
the rules.
I was,
So
like, telling someone about this series, and I, like, was mentioning, like, ginger snaps or something, or one of my Monsters Femme scripts or something, and they're like,
yeah.
"Hey, that's kinda like," and then they explained, like, why. I was like, "Oh, okay, Kat, we gotta do it."
Yeah,
Like, there's no
100%.
reason
But
why
it's a
not.
secret right now. We're not telling you. It's a
Yeah,
secret.
yeah, you'll know.
You'll know
Um,
later.
but if you enjoyed this, I hope you do check out the rest of our Monstrous Femme series. You can check out our eco horror series if you want to be afraid of the environment in a different way.
Yeah.
There's so many levels. You'll find this episode in many of our playlists on YouTube. Um, and like and subscribe. Make sure you drop us
Please.
a comment. Let us know if there are books or films that you want to recommend to us. You can do so at theGhoulsNextDoor@gmail.com, or just follow us on social media and send us messages or comments, especially if there's like eco horror or there's horror novels, trilogies, things like that that have similar messaging that you think would be really beneficial. I'm looking to read it. I'm ready to
Yeah.
do that.
We're
So
like hungry for interaction.
we're hungries. We're
We
hungry.
miss people telling us stuff. We miss
Sorry that you all
stuff.
have to die for us,
Yeah.
but you already had your chance.
Yeah, right?
Look what you
That's
did with
like
it.
okay, so that's like a whole other thing. I'm just gonna real quick,
Yeah.
this is my little soapbox. This is real quick.
Okay, okay.
So that's something like I think is really interesting. So I see a lot of people who in general like want to save the planet. And I get
Mhm.
it. Like 100% we should need to. Like
Yeah.
1000% we need to. But what I usually will write like in my fear is like I like hope the planet survives us. And it's like, yes, I want the us to survive too. That'd be nice.
Yeah.
Because I want to have kids and I want them to have a place to be.
Mhm.
But also it's like I want the planet to survive us.
And it will. It totally will. It's
Yeah,
not going anywhere. It'll just look
it's just
different,
not
and
for us
we can't
anymore.
be here.
It's
Yeah.
not our turn anymore. It's not all over. It's just
It's
it's
not
not
over. It's
ours
just not
anymore.
yours
Yeah.
anymore. Oh my god, Melanie.
I
Like,
really have a blood beard, I just want to
I
say.
can't.
Like it's
Yeah,
it's a lot.
I hope people are watching because we look
My mom's
spooky.
gonna hate this episode just because of this, because she doesn't like seeing me look dead.
Yeah, that's it. Don't get married.
Delete your kids or
Your
your
kids will eat
kids,
you.
yeah,
Or
or everyone else.
and everyone else, then fine.
Yeah,
Get it, kid. Get it.
yeah. Go
Yeah.
live.
I raised a
Go evolve.
fighter.
Here's hoping,
I raised
honestly,
a
that
fighter.
the if there's a new version of human, that they figure out how to be here still. And if that's like scary to us now, that's fine.
Change is always
We
scary.
had our turn. It's fine.
We had a long turn. I think we're done. I think we've
Yeah.
messed this up. I think we've shown that we're done. I
It reminds me of
don't think we
that
need to do it
episode that
anymore.
we had where it's like, this is humanity's done. It's the
Yeah.
bleep bloops of the
Yeah,
sky. And you put in a new
God's like trying to
VHS tape.
yeah. God's like time to try a different race, try a different group of beings.
Yeah.
We'll just
New
reset,
sentient
refresh.
life form. We're gonna do a whole
Yeah.
new one. Control Alt Delete.
This is a failed experiment. It goes in the trash.
Yeah.
Delete trash permanently, and then get some new beings. The sm- okay. Well, bye.
It's like Big Bang Big.
Made a big bang made us. Big crunch eat us.
Yeah. So it's just like, oh, that was a mistake.
My bad. Like rewind.
Yeah. We're a VHS tape in the little blip of universe time. That God just takes
God's
out and
like,
it's just
"Oops."
like, well, we'll try again.
I don't know
New
what
one.
I was thinking. Oops.
Yeah, so it's like Futurama where he's just like sitting in his little blippity bloops in the sky.
Yeah.
And, but he has a VHS tape in this scenario.
Okay.
And he's watching humanity and he's like, guys,
Let's-
this is awful.
Let's start back at the top.
We are not going to renew this season. Let's start
Of humanity.
fresh. There's no season 3 of humanity.
Oh no.
And then it's like, and he takes it out. And he's like, people, and he writes it on there with a Sharpie, and he puts it on the shelf next to other species that he was just like, that might work. And he pops into it, and he's like, you know what? We're gonna start fresh.
And maybe the blue blurbs will do better than us.
Yes.
Or whatever he
The
comes up
schmeckles.
with. The schmeckles.
Schmeagles.
The schmeemorps.
Yep.
Or the